So why is content so important anyways? That's something we talk about a lot on the podcast, is that you need to be producing content in order to add value to your audience, in order to grow your business. But what is it about it that makes that so special? And more importantly, how do you actually go about creating that content in the first place? Well, today's guest on the podcast is an expert in this area, in actually content creation. He talks about content creation, social media marketing, and inbound marketing all the time, all across the country. So we're going to be talking to none other than Don Stanley. Now, Don is really a teacher at heart. He is always out there creating this content and sharing the value of content creation and why business owners of all types, not just online business owners, but people with brick and mortar, people with other service businesses, why they should actually be producing content. Don is the owner of 3 Random Media, and his specialty really is web strategies, content marketing, and social media marketing. So he's the perfect guest here to really talk about content creation for you guys here on the podcast. And his clients are a wide variety of clients, from nationally known nonprofits to Fortune 500 companies to small businesses. And it kind of runs the gamut from online entrepreneurs to actual brick and mortar places and service businesses as well. So we're going to talk about content creation just as a general philosophy to drive new leads into your business. And he's been featured on several different national publications, including ABC News, Wisconsin Public Radio, and has even been named as one of the top 40 professors for social media marketing by Social Media Marketing Magazine, which is, I think, really awesome, especially since he is here in Wisconsin, here at University of Wisconsin-Madison. He was a professor of life science communications. I didn't get to have his class when I was there, but I am getting to learn so much from him right now after school here. And I think you guys are going to really benefit from the strategies that he's going to share. And we're gonna give you some challenges along the way. Don is going to really break things down to why you should be creating audio and video right now. Also, why it's so important to repurpose and revive your old content and not just let that content die. That's something that I see way too many online entrepreneurs doing, is they create content and then just let it die. They push it out there once and then it's over. Well, we're going to talk about some strategies to actually revive that content, or maybe even restructure it a little bit to keep it evergreen, to keep it lasting, to keep it going and adding value to your audience, which is the big focus of this episode. Is all about creating content to add value and drive leads to your business. So now let's dive into this interview with Don. Don, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the podcast.
Yeah, great to be here. Thank you.
So I'm very excited to talk to you. And actually, you just came up this morning randomly. It seems like whenever I meet someone who is a life science communication major, your name always comes up. I was actually at a CrossFit gym this morning, and the coach there is, I guess, one of your students apparently.
Yeah, so it's great. One of the things I love about teaching at the university, and in particular in that department, is there's a lot of doers. I mean, you were in the department at one time too. It's people who are looking to apply what they're learning and not just learn for the sake of learning. And I think that's so cool. So I love to hear that, and especially at a CrossFit gym. That's extra cool.
Yeah, well, like I said, it's just so awesome that so many people actually look up to you. They love your class. They love the way you teach. Unfortunately, I dropped out before your class, so I didn't actually get to
be together now. Yeah. We're learning from each other now.
Well, that's awesome. So, Don, I want to talk to you really about content creation, because ultimately what this podcast is all about is basically that the premise that the best way to grow your business is to consistently add value to your audience. And I know that's what you do best. That's what you preach. That's what you teach. But why is content so important?
The idea of creating content, I mean, people seek out information because they want to learn, they want to grow, they want to better themselves. If you look at what we cover in terms of our day-to-day, the things we think about, how we find information, we go online. As an example, there's 5.1 billion Google searches every day. That's people saying, hey, I have a problem and I want to solve it. I want to figure out what the answer is. And the answer that we look for is good quality content. And so when you start thinking of yourself as a content producer who's out to help your ideal client, you start to get on the map as somebody who is there to help, not just to sell, but to help somebody out. And people do business with people they know and they like and they trust. And the way you become knowable, the way you become likable, and the way you become trustable is helping people out. And content can do that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And I don't know anything else that comes close to that.
Oh, that's an excellent point. So is there any specific type of content that somebody should look to really be producing?
I think, one of the things I always coach my clients on is produce the content that you're capable of producing right now. If you're good at writing and love writing, write. If you love audio, do audio. If you love video, do video. Whatever is the most natural for you and the one that's easy to produce to start getting momentum. Once you get momentum, then you can expand. That being said, you want to think about, I'm getting bullish on audio and video. And the reason is listening to a podcast, there are few things as intimate as that, as being able to sit and hear somebody's voice and feel like they're going on a morning commute with you or a walk with the dog or whatever it is. You feel like that person is with you. Video has the same type of feel, except you get to see the person. And I think there's a lot to be said for being able to see that person in action. I often use Oprah as an example of how many people still, even though her show has been off for a while, feel like they know her and feel really connected to her. And I'll ask them often why. And they'll, well, she just seems so nice and so likable. I'm like, but you've never met her. You have no idea what she's like. But because you've seen her, you feel attached to her in a way that few other mediums allow you to do that. And video and audio are becoming easier to produce. You still have to be conscientious, though, about making sure you're doing it well, because bad audio, bad video, even if it's super easy to just push a button and publish, is still going to be unhelpful and bad audio and bad video.
It's going to actually probably hurt you more than actually not producing anything to some level. I definitely want to talk about audio and video because obviously we love podcasting here.
Absolutely.
But I want to jump back to just the phrase that you were saying, the best way is just to figure out the way you produce content best.
Correct.
I think there's already so much natural resistance against producing any type of content, no matter what the medium is, that just finding your unique gift, the one that is easiest, is so essential. Do you have any tips for someone who is just starting to get there, just starting to produce content on a regular basis that they can use to actually get over that little bit of resistance?
Absolutely. So there's a couple of things you can do. One from just a tactical, we were just talking about this with Dan Miller, that if somebody asks you the same question 3 times, different people ask you the same question 3 times, that means you have to create something. There's enough hands going up saying, hey, we want help figuring out the answer to this question. And the reality is more people are going to turn to looking for information online long before they'll email you or call you because they're afraid of getting sold to. So when you start thinking about what questions am I asked on a regular basis, I always do this with my clients, and we generally within a half an hour will come up with 100 questions. I say, okay, if you take 2 of those and answer those every week, how many years of content have you just come up with? Almost 2 years worth of content, right?
Yeah.
And you can turn that into ebooks, you can turn that into buyer's guides, whatever you would like. The other thing is, and I've dealt with this a lot, the confidence issue of, well, there's other people who have said this, there's other people who have covered this, why should I answer it? How am I qualified to answer it? What you have to do is you have to get out of your own head. And remember, you're not creating content for you, you're creating content to help somebody out. So what I do, it sounds silly, but it works really well, is I visualize the type of person that's my ideal client really struggling with a particular question in mind, and they're stuck. And they might have found some answers on Google, but they just don't connect. And they're looking for somebody who can explain it in a way that they're like, thank you, you've just helped me solve my problem. When I do that, I get out of my head and I think about helping the person rather than trying to write the absolute perfect post or do the exact perfect video. And for me, that technique has worked really well. And a lot of the clients I've coached that's worked really well is turning it on your head and saying, this is not about you. And this is very true with video because I get a lot of people who say, I don't like being in front of camera. And I don't either. But it's not you. It's not about you being on camera. It's about you building a connection with somebody that allows them to see you and feel a connection that they say, hey, I would want to work with this person, or I want to learn from them. And get out of your head, and start thinking of them. And that's been really, really a benefit that, a big technique that has really helped me and a lot of my clients as well.
Oh, that's awesome. Because, I mean, if you do that enough, if you do that visualization enough, you almost become a jerk for not producing the content.
Well, that's what I tell my clients is if you really feel you have something of value. I say, imagine this. Imagine you have a question that you want help answering. And somebody has that answer, but they're afraid to give it to you. How does that make you feel?
Yeah.
It makes you feel like you're getting cheated,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
And you're doing the exact same thing. And it's not to make you feel bad. I need that kind of kick in the pants, though, to produce. Yeah. But it makes you feel like, well, wait a second. I've been helped. And the way I think of it is I've been helped by people helping me out. Now it's my turn to pass that information along. And so I have an obligation to help that person out because I've been helped.
Yeah.
And so, again, get out of your own head and just focus on helping somebody out, and then focus on what it feels like to say, wow, that person had a better day. Their business is running more smoothly. Whatever it is, because I was able to help them out. That's pretty cool.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So now, for you personally, which type of content do you have the most struggle producing?
The written content is the biggest struggle for me, and part of it is coming from an academic world, and an academic world where there's a journalism bent, and I'm around a lot of really good writers. I've always been hypercritical of my writing. And I think probably like most people at the beginning, at least, you feel like if somebody gives you constructive criticism, it isn't constructive.
Yep.
It's on you. It's about you, not about what you've written. And I'm like, no, it's my baby. I've taken so much time and energy, and so for me, that's the biggest struggle. That's where I started getting pushed by a number of my mentors to say, you love speaking. You're a speaker. You love to go around do videos. And so starting to produce more video content. And then what I can do is use a low-cost transcription service to take that video or that audio, transcribe it for $1 a minute or whatever it is, and then I can make that and massage that into a blog post. And I can have a writer, if I want, or an editor go through it and make it into something. So what some of the ways that I've been working around the problem of, okay, get out of my head, don't be hypercritical, but still don't produce junk,
right.
You want to produce good stuff, is by doing things like that, figuring out techniques that do allow me to be more fluid in my speaking, and then take that spoken word and make it into a written word and use it as as a blog post or whatever type email newsletter content, whatever it might be.
No, that's awesome, and that's exactly one of the big things I've been thinking about a lot lately is just how to repurpose content, just in general. Yes. I know I sat down and created a little mind map. I think from like a 20-minute audio video or from a 20-minute video, you can produce 22 different pieces of content that I was able to come up with. It's like, wow, just imagine what that could be. So I think you could take this little interview we're having right here and cut it up in so many different ways.
Absolutely.
Like, that is truly the way you should be producing content.
And there's a great example. I love that 22 pieces of content from the video, because I had a gentleman who works with Marcus Sheridan in the sales line. His name is George Thomas. He Skyped into my class and guest lectured in my class. He videotaped it, and then he was able to go through and edit the video and cut out little segments of answers to students' questions, and he ended up with like 10, 15 videos out of that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just so easy to do. And then by the same token, you could take, let's say you did those 10 blog posts, you could find let's say you produced 30 blog posts. You could see if 5 or 10 of them are around the same theme, put those together in a little booklet. Yeah. And now you've not just written once and published once, you've written once, and now you can publish multiple times. And that really is one of the big keys to people who are like, I don't have the time, or how am I going to keep things going? That repurposing, especially in this era where content saturation is really high, is starting to think strategically about repurposing. And like, for example, one of my clients that I've been working with recently, we're coming up with some holiday campaigns. Well, I tell them what happens every year around October, November, and December. People start getting ready for the holidays, right?
Right.
You can repurpose the same content every year, massage it a little bit with maybe updated information or price guides or whatever it is, but essentially the same thing is going to be needed every year at this time, especially for new audience members. So there's lots of things you can do to get out of your own way and realize, wow, if I do just produce one video and I really take a step back and look at it, I can get 20 pieces of content out of it. How cool is that?
Yeah, and there's something in there that I think is a disconnect for a lot of people that I see, as a lot of the clients that I work with, is they seem to think that everyone has gone through this entire journey with them and not realize you're constantly getting new audience members.
Absolutely.
You know, you can be on podcast episode number 75. Well, a huge amount of your listeners probably haven't heard the first 5 episodes.
Absolutely.
So you need to constantly be promoting those, you know, via social media or a great autoresponder sequence or something like that. So just realizing that repurposing doesn't always mean changing the content. Sometimes it just means throwing it back up there and letting the new audience find it.
And Buffer actually just did this, where in August of 2015, it's either July or August, they didn't produce a single new piece of content. So buffer.com, they're huge. All they did was they reshared old stuff, older stuff, still really good stuff, still the questions that everybody had. But a lot of people are like, well, it was written in February, so I don't want to read it now. But it's still really good and relevant. So all they did was that, and they had a phenomenal new engagement on stuff that had already been created. So a lot of times just looking through what you've already done and resharing it, they didn't change anything. They just reshared it. They had a significant engagement. And that, I think, is, you hit on a key point there, is that you got to get into this sharing strategy mindset too, of what you can put out, because you are always getting new audience members, new followers. I mean, like in your case, maybe a guest comes on your show and then says, hey, make sure to check out, I was on Nick's podcast. Well, people might be being pulled in because of that. Yeah, well, they're brand new to you. And it might be episode, like you said, 75 or 250. And so we have to think about that as well, that people haven't been with us through the entire journey, and to always be welcoming them in and thinking of that way of, you know, how do I keep people coming in and seeing what I've got? And again, that means we're sharing stuff, even if it is a couple months old or a year old or whatever it might be.
Now, is that something that you actually work with your clients to help set up or help them come up with a great strategy around that?
Absolutely, yes. And that's one of the big things, is kind of doing what we'll start out a lot of clients with, if they have content already, is doing an audit and seeing if we can bucket that content around themes or problem areas that a client has, or their customer, I should say, has, or around seasons, and start to see, well, what could we repurpose and what could we take together and package in a way that it fits well. So it's kind of like matching wine with food, you know, figuring out what fits really well together and seeing what you can go through in order to identify what works. And then once you have that, starting to develop a specific sharing strategy. So looking at on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Twitter, on live streaming video, whatever it is, finding out what networks have the most value. So for example, on LinkedIn, one of the clients that I'm working with was not using LinkedIn groups at all, or Facebook groups. And so they hadn't been doing any interacting in communities that are raising their hand saying, we have an interest in this topic, you know, come and join in and give us some help. And that's opened up a whole new possibility of taking content that was already developed and resharing it, and not going in there and pushing and saying, hey, just read my stuff, because you got you know, but going in there and saying, hey, this is a new crop of people that I have not yet been exposed to. And, you know, that gives you an opportunity to find ways to, again, reuse what you've already got. And I think the content sharing is probably the area, I'm almost tempted to say, more important than content creation right now, because of how much content is out there, getting in front of the right people and making sure you're sharing them in the right places. Mark Schaefer wrote the book, The Content Code, which is a lot about that, and figuring out what are the strategies we're going to use, because creating the content used to be the finish line. Hey, I produced this podcast, or I produced this video. Now that's the starting line. So now you have to start thinking about, how do I get it shared out to people that are going to be like, wow, this is helpful, I want to listen in, or I want to watch, or I want to read.
No, I think that's a phenomenal point, and that's something we all need to be a little more strategic about. And I know Derek Halpern always promotes his 80-20. You know, 80% of it is actually marketing, and only 20% is actually creating the content.
Absolutely.
And I think that's such a great rule, and just something that, like you said, it's a changing landscape now, because there's so many people jumping online, realizing that yes, content is important, but now it's gotten to the point where sharing that content is way more important.
Yep. And that's where I think audio and video, one of the reasons I'm bullish on it, because you develop a deeper relationship with somebody when you hear their voice and you hear them and see them than just the written word. And I think that you can develop more of an ongoing relationship where the person wants to come back and hear your voice and or see you. And that allows you to build this what's called an alpha audience. It's the audience who will watch everything you create, or listen to everything you create, or read everything you create. And when you look at the alpha audience, they're a segment of people who love what you're doing so much that they'll listen to, read, watch, or share anything you create. And typically, it's only about 2% of your total audience. And so finding ways to nurture those people, because if they share your content, you're going to get much more traction than if you put an ad out and, push things out to people.
Right.
And so finding those people and developing sharing strategies with them is really important.
No, excellent. And I want to talk a little bit about, you just recently did a video challenge. So I want to talk a little bit, first of all, what was this challenge that you undertook and how did it go?
Yeah, so it was a 30-day challenge. One of the things I almost start out all my clients on are some type of 30-day challenge. Part of the reason is we know that if people do something consistently for 30 days, they'll be more likely to become a habit. Most people, when they'll hear about podcasting or video casting or blogging, will get really excited, and then the shininess of the object wears off and they stop doing it. I've been guilty of that. I've started and stopped and started and stopped. Virtually everybody I know has started and stopped at some point. And the reason that I do a 30-day challenge is I'll talk about this. I talked about this on day 2 of the challenge, is the penny a day analogy. And so it's a financial planner's trick. I'll give you $1 million today, or I'll give you a penny a day that doubles every day. Which one are you going to take? At the end of 31 days, whatever is in your pot, you get to have. Well, most people will say, well, I'm going to guess that the 31 days penny doubling is the one to take. And I'll say, well, why? Well, it just seems like in the end, there's got to be a trick. I'll say, okay, now that's true. If you take a penny a day that doubles every day for 31 days, at day 11, you'll have $10, and the other person will have $1 million if you'd have taken $1 million. At day 20, you'll have something like $10,000, or you'll have $1 million. And at day 31, if you took the penny a day doubling every day, it's about $10.8 million versus $1 million. So you're saying that you're willing to do the work. Well, it's the day 10 to day 15 where you're like, man, I've been doing all this and nothing is happening. This, New Year syndrome.
Yes,
Robbins
exactly.
always talks about,
Absolutely.
give up. And that's when you need to keep going. And you have to realize that it's the little incremental micro investments on a regular basis that are going to compound, even when it's not fun, even when it's like, is anybody watching? Is anybody listening? Is anybody reading? So part of it was some of my clients had challenged me. They're like, okay, we want to see you do one. And, okay, I said, well, what do you guys want to learn about? And it was goal setting and video marketing.
Okay.
And so we decided, okay, I'm going to put together my tips for how you should get started thinking about putting together an actual plan that's actionable and you can implement. And then I'm going to do video tips, 3 minutes or less a day, every day for 30 days. I did 31, it was a bonus day. And just to see what happens. And over time, just like I talked about, people who didn't know me started following and started liking and started sharing, and two totally new audiences. In my case, LinkedIn turned out to be, which didn't surprise me because of my audience base, to be the one that was by far the most valuable and has led to some really interesting interactions. We'll see where those go from a business standpoint. But the idea was to just demonstrate the value of just doing nothing other than answering questions. And if you can answer 30 questions, one a day for 30 days in 3 minutes or less, you can really raise your profile quickly with different audiences, because I got a lot of, hey, I hadn't seen you before, but I'm starting to see you a lot more in my, not too many, would you get out of my feed?
Yeah, right, exactly.
But it was helpful for that recognition, which a lot of us want. A lot of my clients initially need brand awareness. They need people to be aware of who they are and what they're doing. And the more consistently you produce content, the more Google and other search tools will start to say, hey, this person's doing things regularly. They're just not throwing stuff up on the wall and then backing away and saying, forget it. So, and YouTube I was using because Google is owned, or YouTube is owned by Google. And so your YouTube videos rank higher,
Right.
significantly higher. So it was a lot of fun, and that's one of the things that I took as a big, what should you take away from this is that you always have to be experimenting and playing and learning and not being afraid to try something and have it not work. The most successful people in the world are the most successful people in the world because they've tried a lot of things that didn't work.
Right.
And instead of getting, this failure defines who I am, it's just like, it wasn't a good idea, move on. What can I learn from it next? And that wasn't me. I was very much, a mutual friend would call me a recovering perfectionist. I was a perfectionist until I worked with him. But it was like, if it didn't work, then my idea was bad. And that means that I wasn't smart enough to execute on it. And it's like, no, all it means is that you did something incorrectly, learn what you can do better next time around and move on. And that's really has been valuable because I found some networks and did some A/B experiments where I tried some things with certain videos and not with others, and found some things that are doing well and some things that didn't do well that I now know to pursue. And the way the landscape is, it's kind of this constant learning, and you have to always be willing to learn and experiment and adapt because the technologies come out so quickly.
Oh, they really do. They really do. And just kind of talking a little bit about technology and resources, do you have anything right now that you're using on a regular basis that you'd like to recommend as a tool, as a resource for our audience?
Well, one of the big things that I talk about with all of my clients is I'll often get, Nick, you can do this. You've got these fancy microphones and you have these lighting kits. And so what I purposely did was I shot all of my videos with the camera on my laptop, and you could have done it with an iPad. And so they're not super duper quality in terms of like, wow, that's going to win a cinematography award. But I wanted to prove the point that work with what you have. And so many people like, well, when I get this piece of equipment or when I just take this one extra, it's like, no, start producing. The world needs your help now. And the sooner you start producing, the favorite example I like to use is Gary Vaynerchuk. And if you go and you watch his first videos from Wine Library TV, they are almost painful to watch. They're really bad. But he never stopped because he believed in what he was doing. He ended up producing 1,000 episodes. The sales at the liquor store where he was producing Wine Library TV went from 4 million to 60 million, if I'm remembering correct.
I think that's right.
And, it's like he said in a recent interview that the first 19 months of WineLibrary.tv, nobody watched. Hardly there's a few people, but hardly anybody was watching. But he knew it was valuable and he knew it would help people. And so one of the keys is to just, work with what you've got, because the production quality of his early videos wasn't very good. And you're going to get better the more you do it. So work with what you've got. I like to use a number of tools. I'm a HubSpot user, so that's a paying one. But if you're not a HubSpot user, there's a number of tools that are from Buffer has some great options, and Hootsuite does as well for scheduling and looking at basic analytics. Both of them have free options for being able to track how your content is doing. And that's one of the big keys, is using a tool like on your blog, like Google Analytics as well, just to see how are things doing and learning each month. It's kind of like getting on the scale if you're on a weight loss program, or if you're trying to set a bench press record, putting more weight on. You need some type of measure to know, am I getting closer to my goal or further away, so you can course correct.
No, that's excellent. It goes back to that old saying, what gets measured gets managed.
That's exactly.
Yeah, so you need to have those benchmarks there. So Don, I guess where's the best place for people to connect with you if they want to follow up, want to learn more, want to maybe see your video challenge or your next challenge you're going to do? What is going to be the next one? Do you know yet?
I'm going to be digging into how to share the content and what are some strategies for, what do you do? Okay, you talked about the idea of we need to share, but how do I action it? How do I make that actionable? And what do I go through? So I'm always answering questions that people have, though, so people can send me questions. Sometimes I'll send a personal little video with an answer, and then turn that into a blog post or turn that into a video post. But I love to teach and I love to help people get it. I've been lucky to have people like you and Chris Brogan and all these others who've helped me out. And it's cool to now be in a position to say, hey, I know enough to help you out, help you get over the hurdle. And just remember, pass it on when you get the opportunity for somebody comes to you looking for help. So yeah, 3 Rhino Media, the number 3. rhino, like the animal, media.com. And then you can find me under that on all the social networks.
Awesome, and we'll be sure to link all of those up in the show notes as well. And I guess last question for you: if you were just kind of starting out producing content, you were, like our listeners, pretty new to this game, what would be some of the very first steps that you'd give them, some of the very first action steps that they can implement this week to really start creating that content?
The first thing would be to sit down and list out those questions. Say, what are the most common questions we're asked? What questions can we answer? Because the way that I use that is, let's say you would call me with a question. That means you're unique because not many people are going to call. And I say, hey Nick, this is Don, great to talk. Okay, tell you what, I know we covered a lot. I'm going to send you a couple of links to blog posts we have, just so you can learn more and go deeper in terms of what we talked about. That's super valuable. So you think of those questions that you're getting asked on the phone, just start writing out those answers. When somebody calls you or emails you, say, hey, here's a little bit of a personal answer, but here are some links to go check out more information so you can dig into this when you have time. That's the first step at starting to feel like, hey, this has value outside of just being posted on a blog, because you have all of your salespeople, you have, even if it's just you ship those links out whenever somebody contacts you to go along with an answer. And that's going to start saying, oh, this is helpful. I'm not just producing stuff just for a blog that's not getting read. It's, hey, I'm producing stuff that I can use as a part of my sales cycle.
I really like that, because that's something I know I'm not doing enough of. I have this content out there, but I'm not even thinking about necessarily doing that. So that's a strategy that I'm going to start implementing as well. So awesome. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the podcast. It's been great.
It's been great. I really appreciate it, and I love what you're doing and changing people's lives.
Hopefully you enjoyed this episode. So now really is your time to go out there and take action to actually put some of the things we talked about into practice. And I highly encourage you to take one of those 30-day challenges. Go, whether it's through Periscope, whether it's putting a video up on YouTube, whether it's recording just your voice on your iPhone and publishing it out into your audience. Go through a 30-day challenge yourself. I'm going to actually take one here too. I'm going to start it right with you guys. We're going to do a 30-day Periscope challenge. So you can find me over on Periscope, Nick Palkowski, just all one word, and I'll be sure to link that up in the show notes page, as well as all of Don's information, so you can learn more from him. He has an awesome Blab channel going right now, where he's doing regular Blab episodes. So I highly suggest you go check that out to learn from him, really even more into content creation and video marketing especially. He talks a lot about that and has some great strategies that I'm going to be putting into place here in these next 30 days. So I highly suggest you go join one of those challenges. Head on over to powerofpodcasting.tv. You'll find the show notes there. Let us know what your 30-day challenge is. We want to really support you and help you out in any way possible. So until next week's episode, go out there, take action, and truly maximize your impact and your income.